I wish to make a brief contribution to this condolence motion in honour of Demetrius Jim Forrest. Others have spoken passionately about his life and history, so I don't intend on going into depth in that.
Mr Speaker, once again, Queensland has failed to get its fair share from the federal government.
Shame.
Last night's federal budget was a disappointment for our great state of Queensland. It failed the 7,000 families hoping for a permanent solution to their homes constantly.
Order.
It failed the millions wanting a permanent solution to hospital funding.
Shame.
In fact, Mr Speaker, health funding was cut.
Shame.
It failed to chart a course to address climate change across our nation.
Shame.
It failed to address issues on housing. It failed to address renewables.
Shame.
And it failed on regional road funding.
Shame.
Mr Speaker, it failed on supporting Copper String to open up our northwest minerals province. Mr Speaker, it failed to factor Queensland into the future. Mr Speaker, our budget is about priorities. Right now we have one, helping the people of this state who have lost everything during the floods. Mr Speaker, to live through one flood is to live in constant anxiety whenever the rain falls again. Imagine the distress of home and business owners just completing the clean-up from one flood, only to have to face the prospect of seeing their properties flood again. Mr Speaker, our $771 million joint flood resilience package would allow 500 families to sell their houses to us and move out of the flood zone forever. Grants up to $100,000 to raise houses higher, and $50,000 so that those who stay can build back better. Yeah. Many of the people this package would help have no insurance. Mr Speaker, despite our urgent pleas, there was no allocation in the budget for the federal government's share. A splash of cash is nice, but protecting people from floods is far better. Yeah. Mr Speaker, Queensland does not ask for charity. We pay our taxes. Queensland earns its keep. In our hour of need, we simply ask for some of it back. All we want is our fair share, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, people expect governments to work together for them. I support and welcome measures that will ease cost of living pressures, including a cut to fuel excise. But these measures are temporary. Their benefits are fleeting. Far better to look for permanent solutions, such as making electric vehicles more affordable to more people, as my government has done, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, by far the most telling budget figures for those are those to do with population growth. The budget predicts Queensland to lead on net interstate migration every financial year until 2026. A massive 41,000 Australians are expected to vote with their feet and choose a better life in Queensland this financial year. A total of 129,200 will move here over the next 5 years. Mr Speaker, you can't blame them, can you? You can't blame them. That is the equivalent of every man, woman and child currently living in Bundaberg, plus Gladstone and Maryborough, plus Gympie and Bowen and Stanthorpe, all arriving over the next 5 years. That is the budget's greatest failure. It fails to provide the money that will help provide the services for the Queenslanders of today and the many more Queenslanders of tomorrow.
Shame.
Mr Speaker, where is this country going? What sort of Australia does this budget provide for? A cynic might call this an election budget. Many of the major infrastructure projects announced recently are either not in the budget or not fully funded, Mr Speaker.
Shame.
I will leave it to the people of this state to pass their own judgment on what sort of government they want, one preoccupied with its own survival or one focused on them.
That's right.
Mr Speaker, while the severe weather warning has been cancelled in the south-east, we continue to experience heavy rainfall from that low-pressure system which has moved south. I'm advised, Mr Speaker, that this morning a rescue was completed west of Dalby. Crews were on site when a man was stranded on his car roof. I'm advised that he has since been rescued, which is great news. There were also 2 other rescues overnight by swiftwater crews in the southwest. 3 people in a car were rescued from floodwater at Cecil Plains, and at Condamine Plains, crews worked with a local farmer to rescue a person from a truck. 128 calls for assistance were made in the last 24 hours, the majority of those for sandbags, leaking roofs and flooding. There are 3 schools closed, Cedar Creek, Darlington and Hillview, and there are many road closures, particularly on the Gold Coast, including Beachmont Road from Narang to Murwillumbah Road to Binnambara Road due to a significant landslide, and detours are in place. Please, if it's flooded, forget it. That low-pressure system that moves south is now severely impacting northern New South Wales, including Byron Bay. And our thoughts go out once again to those communities, particularly Lismore, which is experiencing a major flood event again. Mr Speaker, Queensland is deploying 12 swiftwater technicians to assist our southern neighbours with flood rescue operations. They'll be based in Coolangatta and tasked to support New South Wales operations as needed. We stand ready to deploy any further assistance if required. Mr Speaker, as we deal with more wet weather this week, donations continue to pour in for our flood-affected communities from last month's deluge. So far, tens of millions of dollars have been raised for the Queensland Flood Appeal, and I want to thank specifically our hospitality venues who, off the back of a challenging couple of years, are helping to raise funds for flood-affected Queenslanders. At the weekend, one of Brisbane's iconic pubs, the Breakfast Creek Hotel, held a People's Day fundraiser, similar to what they did after the 2011 floods. Flood-affected themselves, management staff, patrons and volunteers pitched in to clean up and get the hotel back up and running, serving steaks and pints to the masses. 100% of proceeds from Sunday are being donated to Give It. Mr Speaker, I'm advised that around $100,000 was raised, with around 1,000 people pouring into the pub that day. So that's great news, and we thank them. And our fundraising efforts continue tonight, right here at Parliament. Mr Speaker, with yourself and the Leader of the Opposition, we will co-host Queensland Parliament's Flood Appeal reception, with all money raised going to the Queensland Flood Appeal and the 5 charity organisations: Give It, Australian Red Cross, the Salvation Army, St Vincent de Paul Society Queensland and Lifeline Queensland. This event, Mr Speaker, is now sold out. It is a great result, and I'd also like to pay a special mention to Spencer Jolly, who's done, once again, an amazing job coordinating all this. I also want to thank the staff of the Parliament and also DPC for helping to coordinate, Mr Speaker. And hopefully we'll be able to report some very good news tomorrow following. There's a lot of great auction items, so if you're a member of Parliament, you better come with your wallets very deep, because every single dollar is going to help those in need. And finally, Mr Speaker, I've got some good news today for Queensland as well, and great news for Ipswich. Our government has helped lure international beverage manufacturer Frucor to set up a $400 million beverage manufacturing facility in Swanbank, Mr Speaker. That's going to quench the thirst of the Ipswich jobs market. This is an incredible coup of our state and a significant vote of confidence in our economic recovery that an international company of the calibre has chosen Queensland ahead of other states and countries to establish a permanent manufacturing facility here. This project is expected to create around 450 construction and installation jobs by 2023-2024, and will also create 160 long-term roles when it starts operating in mid-24. See, Mr Speaker, on this side of the House, we're about jobs, Mr Speaker. Growing jobs, creating jobs, Mr Speaker. And there's going to be a lot more good news coming up to our budget, Mr Speaker, as we continue to attract investment into this state. They'll be looking for skilled and semi-skilled workers, including machinery operators and drivers, technicians and trade workers, professionals, sales workers, managers, clerical and administration staff. I'm advised early work construction could begin as soon as the 3rd quarter of this year, for operations to commence in mid-2024. The facility will have the immediate capability to produce up to 20 million cases of drinks each year, with the ability to significantly scale up in the future, all proudly made in Queensland.